Hey guys, it's Shannon, producer and host of Blacktivities and founder of Black Panache Productions. I hope you've been enjoying Blacktivities. We'll be back with Season 5 on June 17th. With this platform, my ultimate goal is to be a voice for the voiceless, to spotlight the stories and information that matters to people of color and the underrepresented. So I want to share with you something that I've been working on called writing narratives. The intro explains what it's all about, and I wanted to share it with my Blacktivities fam first. I'll be sharing the first few episodes with you as bonus content, but writing narratives will also have its own feed. With this one, I'm taking my time. I'm not publishing on a schedule because I'm focusing on quality versus quantity. I want every episode to be high quality content. So if you like it, subscribe using the link in the show notes so you won't miss any newly released episodes. Grace and blessings. Narratives are stories, and I love a good story. But writing narratives is about correcting or rebalancing those stories, histories, and perspectives that might have been misrepresented or overlooked. Sometimes we even have to write the narratives in our own minds and rethink how we look at the world and ourselves. You write a narrative by getting to the truth. So let's do it. This is Shannon, and you're listening to Writing Narratives. The sounds of a bouncing basketball, squeaking shoes on the court, the ball hitting the rim or the backboard, and the swish of the net are all nostalgic for me. My dad was a coach for pretty much my whole childhood, and I practically grew up in the gym. I've always loved the game, but never had the skills to play at a higher level. Recently, players like Caitlyn Clark, Angel Reese, and Kamilla Cardoso have brought major attention to women's basketball. You've seen them interact with their coaches. Shout out to Dawn Staley and the championship-winning South Carolina Gamecocks. But there's several other young women on that team that you don't hear about who dominated at the high school level, but aren't the superstars on their college teams. And you don't hear about the immense pressure and tough choices and sacrifices they're being asked to make at such a young and confusing time in their lives. I spoke to someone who knows a lot about these things because she experienced them firsthand. Wynter Whitley is an extraordinary athlete and former Duke Lady Blue Devils basketball player who had a standout season her freshman year, but when tragedy hit, her game and relationship with the coaches was collateral damage. Her story helps us write the narratives about grief, self-advocation, and self-worth. It writes the narrative that we don't always have to be strong, and it's okay to take the time to heal when we need it. Before you listen, I do want to warn you that there is a brief mention of suicide. Without further ado, here's Wynter's story. Today, I get to chat with an amazing athlete. She is so good that she already had a scholarship to play basketball at a Division I school in the 8th grade. She was recruited by all the D1 schools except for Penn State. I don't know what was up with that, but I want her to tell you her story. So I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail. I'm just going to list a few of her accolades. She graduated from Holy Innocents Episcopal School in Atlanta, Georgia, and she finished her high school career with over 2,600 points, 1,000 plus rebounds, and 500 plus assists. She led her high school team to a state championship her sophomore year. She was named the number 5 player in the country by Sporting News her senior year and the number 3 player in the country by USA Today, both her junior and senior years. She was Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year and Parade All-American in 2001. At Duke University, shout out to the Blue Devils, she was named to the All ACC freshman team. There, she led Duke to 4 straight appearances in the Elite Eight and 2 trips to the Final Four. After college, she played professional ball in Europe and South America, and she is now a mom of 3 and a learning specialist in the field of education. And she is her. My guest today, Wynter Whitley.
Well, thank you for such a welcoming opening.
You have done a lot.
Yes, busy.
So, how did you get into playing basketball?
When I was younger, I was always tall for my age. Like, you would walk into a classroom, you would see the desks like all lined up, and then there's mine. Like, boop, because my legs wouldn't fit. Like, I'd always played golf and tennis growing up. I started getting made fun of for being tall, which I thought was really odd. I remember I came home from school. I had to have been in 2nd grade, maybe. I came home from school. I asked my mom and dad, I was like, who's Paul Bunyan? And I remember they looked at each other. They sat me down and they told me a story of Paul Bunyan. And then my brother had always played basketball, like from time he was little to time he was in high school. And my parents decided to put me into a sport that would celebrate people being tall. There's a benefit of being tall. So I started playing rec ball when I was in 4th grade. I was awful, horrible, I wasn't coordinated, had no idea what I was doing, but I was appreciated and it made me feel good for being tall, even though I wasn't scoring, I wasn't getting rebounds, but I was just pretty much just there to alter shots. And then it just slowly progressed into something I enjoyed doing, to the point where 4th grade, I played at like my rec team. 5th grade, I tried out for the 6th and 7th grade, like metro team that feeds into the high school that I would have gone to. I made that team. I didn't play because, again, I wasn't that great. I think I was just on the team because I was tall. It didn't really kick into me until I was like 11 years old. And that's when I started training outside of the season. And I had like a post coach, I had a shooting coach, I had a conditioning coach. So that's when I took it up a notch. And then I ended up going to Holy Innocents in 7th grade. I had a phenomenal coach. He worked me hard, but it was greatly appreciated because he set me up for success from my 7th grade year all the way until I think he left my junior year. And that's kind of how I just started, was just something as simple as, I guess now the term would be bullying. I wasn't picked on, I was bullied constantly, just for being tall. And so that's how I started playing ball. It was just kind of, my parents realized that they needed to boost my confidence and make me feel good and confident about being tall. So that's how I started playing basketball.
Now, you committed to Duke in 8th grade, which is super early.
Yes, verbal commitment.
Did you have any doubts about that as you got older? And how did it feel to finally officially sign with Duke when you were able to do so?
Oh, it was a relief. And it's weird because in growing up, like once I started playing, I think once I started at Holy Innocents, we would always go to University of Georgia summer team camps and some like position camps. And everyone always thought I would go to Georgia because that's where we went to camp and that's where the coaches knew me and I knew them. And it was always a friendly conversation or a wave, like especially once I started playing AAU and like exposure camps, they would always be there. And when I decided that I wanted to go to Duke in 8th grade, it was kind of, a lot of people were shocked, but I think a couple things played into it. Duke was a lot smaller than Georgia, which I needed a smaller environment. I also wanted to be a part of something that was building. And I saw that at Duke University. Like Georgia, they were growing up, they were always contending in like, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4. And that was awesome. But I felt like it just needed to be a part of something that was on its way up. And when I was at Holy Innocents, one of my favorite teachers, Coach Savage, he was my biology teacher. He graduated from Duke and he wrestled at Duke. And his wife at the time, she played soccer at Duke. And so I think that had played a huge role in me looking at Duke, because he was the one that was kind of like, you should, it's a great school. These are things I did when I was there. And so making that verbal commitment, it felt right, to the point where I didn't take any other official visits. Duke was my only official visit.
Oh, wow.
And even playing when I was at Holy Innocents, play in 7th and 8th grade, and even 9th grade and 10th grade, we went to UNC's team camp, because my coach was very smart, Buster Brown. He wanted to expose me to these different schools without making official visits. So it's like, by the time I got to that point to decide where I wanted to go, which is technically like your junior year when you sign, I already had it in my head, like where I wanted to go, because we had been to UNC's camps. We've been to Clemson's camps, Georgia Tech's camp. So I kind of already in my head knew where I wanted to be, even though we never went to Duke's team camps.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah. And also, my dad played football at the University of Houston. He was recruited there, and he died when I was 9. So I think his story, my mom listening to his stories about like the whole recruiting process, she was kind of like privy to like what to do and what not to do.
How did it feel when you finally officially signed with Duke?
I was excited. And I remember exactly like what I wore too. Hideous green sweater. With like, it was like a higher turtleneck, as like a ribbed sweater. I know I was relieved. I was excited, but I still know I had to like focus on like being a junior in high school and completing my senior year. And actually, it's actually kind of scary too, because it's like when you sign, you're committing to this school, and you hope in the back of your head, like, you don't get hurt, you don't tear an ACL, you don't have a major injury, because you sign with them, and going into that season, you are a freshman, you already have, your seniors and juniors and sophomores looking down at you because you are a freshman. And then, so like in the back of your head, it's like, if I injure myself, I'm taking like a couple of more steps back, and I'm competing with the other freshmen that are coming in, even though Monique Curry and I came in at the same time. We were the same position, so it didn't matter. But it was a sense of relief, because I didn't have to answer any more phone calls. I didn't have to receive any more letters, because there were some coaches that were shocked that I had verbally committed so early, and that were trying to change my mind. And you want to be respectful. And some of them weren't reciprocating my respect that I was giving them. It was, well, does your mother know what you did? Of course, my mom knows what I did. I can't believe your mother would let you do something like this. And I'm like, if that's the way if that's the way you're talking to me, I'm glad I'm not coming to your university.
Right. So what was it like being an athlete at a Division I school?
Freshman year, first semester, excited, kind of a little fear, because it's the unknown, and it's going to be a step above what you did in high school. I think more of excitement. And I wasn't homesick. I wasn't afraid to be away from home. My mom knew that that's just, it's part of life. And from her perspective as a parent, you're supposed to let your child, leave the nest. So I wasn't nervous. I think I was more excited and anxious to get everything started. And I think the hardest part about being a student athlete, it's not necessarily the independence that you have, but it's everything that you have to juggle. Like, you have to juggle making sure you wake up on time to make it to practice. And then from there, going to class, and then from there having meetups with classmates, and then from there going to the training room to get treatment on a strained hamstring, or whatever it is, and then going back to class, and then having practice in the evening. So it's a lot. I even look back at it and I'm like, holy cow, like 18 years old, you're going to college. And you're expected, especially as a student athlete, to juggle all these different things, like to try and have a social life, to try and be your own person. It's all very controlled where you don't have that freedom. And like by the time the season's finished and you have like 2 weeks of freedom, you're like, I could just be a student and just kind of enjoy the student aspect of being on a college campus. As far as basketball goes, I think that was the least difficult adjustment because I think my high school coach prepared me so well mentally and physically that I was unfazed because I'd been lifting weights too since I was 7th grade, been doing conditioning because actually my god brother, he was my conditioning and strength coach. So, and agility. So especially during the summer times, like that's what I was doing. So I was prepared in that sense. And even the strength and conditioning coach even told me, he's like, I've never seen a freshman come in like this before. And I'm like, it's because I've been doing this stuff since high school. So that part was easy. I think the most challenging part was combining everything together. That was the most difficult.
What was a typical schedule like as far as practice and working out and all that?
So preseason was you'd have like position work or individual stuff, individual meet. Like you'd maybe have 3 people in your group, and it's pretty smart what they do. Instead of having like all post players, they would have like a guard and maybe 2 posts. So then you're working kind of within the system of a play.
Okay.
And so it's not necessarily isolated. So in preseason, we'd have those like 3 days a week. So in the morning, you'd either have conditioning or weight training, and then you'd have all of your classes. And then you'd come back in the evening and have usually pickup, or sometimes it was conditioning. So it was like really realistically like 3 workouts a day between conditioning, weights, and playing pickup. And in between all that, expected to go to class, expected to focus, even though you're exhausted. I actually even remember going to study hall because study hall was mandatory freshman year. I think we had to do it 8 hours a week, depending on our grades. I would fall asleep, especially after our pool workouts. Those were the ones that were so exhausting. I would literally be in study hall asleep, and then 2 hours would go by. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll go back to my dorm and try and focus on getting something done. But usually it never happened. I would go to training table, which our training table was phenomenal, take a shower or stuff, go back to my dorm and fall asleep. It was intense. Like at one point I felt like I was investing more time into basketball than I was being a student. And at the time though, I understood it, and I still understand it because they're paying for your scholarship. So it's like, this is what happens when you're a student athlete. But sometimes I feel like the student part is a little bit lost, at least in my experience. Like I was told going into it, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and Duke doesn't have a pre-vet school. They have pre-med, but not pre-vet. And I was told, okay, being recruited, oh, you could take some classes at NC State. You could take some classes at UNC, like whatever. I was like, okay, cool. Well, when that time came, it was, well, if you're late for practice, there will be a punishment.
So there's a catch there.
Yeah, I'm like, but you said that, and I'm very respectful of my elders, so I don't really question and I don't talk back, but I wish I would have advocated for myself and said, hey, like this was one of the marketing things that you guys proposed to me was, yeah, you want to be a veterinarian. NC State has a great vet program. They actually have a vet program. You could take some classes there, but if you're late coming back, there will be a punishment. What? Like, okay. So then, and honestly, it was a good thing I didn't do pre-med playing basketball. I would have failed out. Like there's no doubt in my mind because I was mentally, I think, too young to kind of juggle everything. If you gave all those classes to me now with 3 kids and working full time, I could probably do it because I have that maturity level.
Right.
But at the time I didn't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in your sophomore year, you experienced the loss of your brother. Can you tell us about what happened and how it affected you?
Yeah. So the summer going into my sophomore year, I was home for that summer because you always had the option of staying for the summer and doing conditioning and catching up on classes. Some players did it. Great for them. I was not one of them. I was like, I want to go home. Like, I need a break. And also could train here because we always got like a book of things to do. And so I trained at home. So I happened to be at home. My sister, who was in high school at the time, I think she was a junior or a senior. We both happened to be home. My mom was here. I remember we got a phone call, and it was almost like a collect call in a way, like calling from Grady Hospital. And my mom like looked at the phone, listened to it, and just hung it up. Didn't think anything of it. Then we got another phone call, and it was one of my brother's friends, and they told me, like, your brother's been in an accident. We're at Grady Hospital, which is one of the best trauma hospitals in the southeast of the country. And so, because we were too, I think, frozen to drive safely. Mm-hmm. So the person that came to pick us up happened to be the same person that was there for us the night my dad died too. Oh. So she came and picked us up, and she drove us down to Grady. I remember what I was wearing too. I was wearing a Duke blue shirt with white letters. I actually still have the t-shirt. For some reason, I can't let it go. I was wearing black, those like softy shorts or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what I was wearing. And I remember like walking into the hospital, expecting to see my brother and be like, what are you doing? Get to the hospital. They bring us to some room. The doctor that came to talk to us kept saying, well, he was bleeding out and we did this. His shoulder was dislocated and we did this. He was conscious when he came in. We did this. So I was expecting, he's still in recovery right now. We'll bring you guys back as soon as he's out. That's not what happened. She said they tried to do everything that they could, but he would bled out too much because his pelvis completely shattered and it severed his femoral artery, and there was nothing they could do. And I just remember standing in the room, and I went to the bathroom because I felt like I had to throw up. Didn't throw up, but just dry heaved. Losing my dad was hard. I think my brother might have been a little bit harder because he was young. He was 32 years old. He had a daughter on the way. He died in June. She was born in September. There was a 12-year difference between us, but we were always together. Like, he was like my biggest fan at every single basketball game. And my brother was like the cat's meow to women. So he was always like hanging out with some girl, like, you know what I mean? And hanging out with his friends. So he was really popular. And so for him to like come to my games, to take time and even bring his friends to my games and to cheer me on meant the world to me. And having him out of my life in that capacity with basketball, I kind of lost my drive. Like, I didn't really want to play anymore because I associated basketball with my brother, because my brother taught me everything that I knew. Yes, I had shooting coaches and all these coaches, but he built the game in me. We would watch games together. We would play outside together. Anything that he was doing, I wanted to do. And he always included me if he could. So when he died, I just, like, my light kind of left. And I kind of went into some depression, but I didn't want to admit that that's what it was, or I denied that's what it was. That summer, I met with my pediatrician, who we're family friends with, and she encouraged me to take like Zoloft. And I was like, I don't want to. And she's like, I think you should, because everything that you're describing to me sounds like depression. And I'm the type of person where, like, I could do this on my own. Like, I don't need that. And I ended up taking it, which I was also, I think, self-medicating with alcohol too in college. But that summer, my mom tried to encourage me to stay home. I'm like, nope. I need to go to school. I need to get my mind off of it, because that's what I did when my dad died. I went to school the very next day. I didn't make it the full day, but I just got to keep going. And when I got to school, it was awful. I think I cried every day. I was going out and drinking. My boyfriend at the time didn't know what to do with me because I was an emotional roller coaster. Like the smallest things would set me off. I think I know I was doing some self-harm. Like I remember going through a red light and just being like, you know what? If a car hits me, it hits me. I'm just done. Like I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. And during preseason, one of my teammates came up to me, Isis Tillis. I remember this. We were in the hall and she is the most honest person. And she looked at me and she goes, you need to go home. And I was like, no. Like I talked to the coaches. They need me here. Like I need to be here. I need to be here for you guys. And she looked at me and said, she's like, Wynter, we need you, but you need yourself. Like you don't need to be here. And I played my sophomore year. Again, it was up and down. It wasn't fun because I was very unpredictable. I was diagnosed with ADD in 7th grade. So I took Ritalin and then I stopped. And then in high school, I was like, I don't want to take it because I want to try to do this on my own. So my mom got me a tutor and I ended up graduating with like a 3.7 or 3.8, which I was like, I'll take it. So then when I got to college, I was like, I can do this without, my medicine. Nope, I needed that. So I started taking that, went from like C's to B's. After my brother died, I felt like my coaches were asking me more of, because they didn't know what to do with me. Did you take your medication? Not my Zoloft, but my Adderall, so that I could focus when I was playing. Mm. And I started picking up on that. And at the end of the year, which I was so happy it was over with, and we actually made it to the Final Four that year. And I remember it was in Atlanta, and all I could think about is, I wish my brother were here. Like I'm in my hometown and it doesn't feel like it. My mom didn't come to the games when we played at Georgia Tech. She didn't come to the Final Four. And I'm like, why isn't my mom coming to my games? She went to the ACC games, but she wouldn't. And that was only because my sister was there. My niece, she was little, she was there. My godbrother, who was my strength coach. So like all of them were there. And so I think that's why she came to some of the games, but she didn't come to the Final Four. And like it being in Atlanta, we stayed at the Marriott Marquis downtown. And I remember I opened my blinds. What's in front of me? Grady Hospital.
Oh,
so much fun.
Oh my gosh.
And so like so many things started. I just wasn't in the right mental state. And after the season was finished, I think we lost to the Final Four. There's UConn, Tennessee. I asked my mom, I'm like, Mom, why? I felt like you never came to my games. And she has anxiety too. So like even in my high school games, she would come to, but she would stand the whole time and she would stand by herself. She never cheered. It was more of just like, she'd, nod her head with her hands clasped like this. And so I asked her, why didn't you ever come to my games? She's like, I couldn't. I'm like, why couldn't you? Like, you're a very able person. She's like, I don't like your coaches. What? I'm like, what? I don't understand. I want to say it was after my sophomore year. She told me that I didn't know this. It was all behind my back. She told my coaches to encourage me to stay home. But then when I met with my coaches before like the season started of my sophomore year, they told me, we need you. Your teammates need you. You need to this is a great way to keep your mind off of things, just to stay in the routine of things. So they completely went against what my mom had said. But at the time, I didn't know it. And my mom is the type of parent, she let me make my own decisions. And in her letting me make my own decision to go back was one of the worst. It's one of the biggest regrets I have in my life, because I know, looking back on it, I should have stayed home. I should have stayed home for a year. I should have gathered myself, gathered my thoughts, gathered my emotions before I went back. And I didn't do that. And to this day, it's still one of my biggest regrets. Not like I don't regret going to Duke, because I loved it and I loved my teammates, but I regret not sitting that year out.
Right.
And I think I didn't want to because I didn't want to be seen as, I think I saw myself as a failure maybe if I would have stayed home. And I didn't want to be seen in that light because I'm type, just keep going, just, put your blinders on, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I saw that as being strong or being tough. And that's not what it was. It just wasn't smart. And then I had the coaches try to encourage me to meet with our sports psychologist who actually just recently died, Greg Dale. And I didn't trust him. And I don't think it was necessarily really him. I thought that my coaches would kind of pry him to share what our conversations were like or what kind of headspace I was in. And so I was afraid to utilize him and open up about things that have happened. So then different psychologist, and it's like I don't know, it's just, I didn't feel comfortable talking. And I don't know if it was just the situation being at Duke, or maybe I just wasn't ready to. It's like I felt like all the conversations I had with the therapist were very like on the surface and not like really deep.
Had you done therapy before?
Yeah. So after my dad died, it was the same thing. My mom sent me to a therapist and I just sat there, and it's almost after my dad died, like I went kind of mute. Like I just didn't want to talk. And I even told my mom, like, Mom, I don't know this person and you want me to talk to them. Like, I don't know her. So why would I talk to her about my feelings? That was my first experience with therapy. And then after my brother died was my second experience. And then 7 years ago, I tried to start it back up again. And it just didn't feel right. And I know I need to see a therapist just about like the stresses I have in my life with trying to be a mom, trying to be, a good wife to my husband, trying to be at work, and just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so I know I need to see someone. It's just a matter of time. It's like, when am I supposed to do all this?
Right. Yeah. 'Cause just being a mom is like enough to stress you out. So
yes, it's one of the hardest jobs.
Yes, I agree. Now, when you found out that your mom had asked the coaches to encourage you to actually come home and they didn't do that, did it make you feel a way?
Oh yeah. I felt like I couldn't trust them. And I gave them that trust. Like when they were telling me, we need you, your teammates need you. When I was being recruited by them, I put all of my trust in them. Freshman year, I had an awesome year, and I expected the same thing to happen like my sophomore year. My role at Duke, my freshman year, was completely different from my role when I was in high school. And again, that's part of the reason why I went to a Division I school. Like I knew I wasn't going to be scoring 23 points a game. I was ready to have, even in high school, my teammates did support me, but I think they looked at me as like, you're supposed to do this because you're, our star. So without them, I wouldn't have been the player that I was because they supported me. But I wanted a chance to support other people and kind of to be a role player. And that's what I was. And so that's what I expected to do my sophomore year, because I put my trust in these coaches and they let me down once. It's like I was no good to them anymore because they couldn't figure me out and I couldn't figure me out at the time. But it's like, if you would have just encouraged me to stay home and to look out for my well-being, I could have been that player that you guys expected me to be. And when I wasn't for some games, it was, they blamed it. And some of it, I know majority of it was because I wasn't in the correct headspace, but it was like, Wynter, you have to live in the present. You have to do that. And I'm like, I am trying to. It's not working. Like my brother was my right-hand person. Like it's not that easy just to turn it off and turn it on. Because I even did this my junior year in high school. No, my sophomore year in high school, my best friend committed suicide. And so again, I remember our coach, who was basketball driven, said, Wynter, do you want to play? He had us all gather in this room, and my best friend who committed suicide, his sister was on our basketball team. And she even looked to me and was like, do you want to do this? And I'm like, I think we have to. And another time, so the very next day we're playing, it wasn't a state championship game, but it was the year we won state championship, and we did it. And so I'm thinking in my head, come sophomore year at college, you know what, Wynter, you've done it before. You can do it again. And it was completely different because it was my brother. My best friend was my best friend, and we were close too, and it was unexpected. My brother's was unexpected, but it was different. And so, but I still had that mentality of I could do it again. Like, and when I heard my coaches kind of had that same confidence in me, I was like, I can do it again. But I think the difference in coaching when I was in high school, and again, my coach in high school he was intense, but he gave me an option. He gave our team an option. I didn't have an option. It wasn't a sit down conversation like, Wynter, what are you feeling? What would you like to do? And then junior year, I tore my ankle up. I complained about it all year long. Nothing happened until summer when I finally got an MRI. And it was like, oh, let's get an MRI now because it's the summertime. We don't need you. So let's see what's wrong with it now. It was after my sophomore year. Junior year, I played like 4 games because rehab was about 6 months. I played like 4 to 6 games. And then I started advocating for myself. And I said, you know what? I can't do this. Like, I thought I was ready to come back. I physically can't do what I know I'm capable of doing. So then I redshirted the rest of that year. Went to practice. I was still supportive of my teammates. Mid-senior year, I went to my coach and talked about a redshirt year, having an extra year. And I even told my coach, I don't even have to play, but I would like to start my master's and be on the team, be a practice player, anything like that. Nope, I don't think that's a possibility. I'm sorry, what? That's not a possibility? But a girl that was on my team, she got a redshirt year because she found out who her adoptive parents were. And that was like a traumatic thing for her. She got a redshirt year, but I can't get one. And then that's when it became a little personal, where I was like, you know what? Like, I see how this works. I'm no longer of use to you. And I hate it because anytime there's a reunion at Duke, I want to go back and be with my teammates, but my coaches are there. And still to this day, like if I were to see one of them, I don't know how I would react. I don't know if I would say anything or if I would try to and it would come out, because I don't want to be nasty about it, but it's like I do want to say something, but I know that I need to be able to say it in a calm way so that my point is clear and it's understood about how they treated me, because it wasn't right.
That's very understandable. And that sounds like a lot of pressure for a young person.
Oh yeah, big time. And it's like, I wish I would have been more, not combative, but I wish I would have spoke up a little bit more. I think if I would have tried harder or exhausted all my options, technically they would have to give me one, I think. But at that point, I was like, you know what? Clearly, I'm not wanted here. So therefore, I don't want to be here.
Right. What do you feel like was the difference between her situation and yours?
She was scoring.
Okay. I
was, like I said, like a typical role player. I was defense, taking charges, making the assist. I mean, I would score points here and there, but I think that was the biggest difference. Even though I was a great player, I wasn't the one that was being interviewed after games. My name wasn't in the paper for, getting, like tipping the ball, which led to a steal, which is fine. But I think for them, that was the biggest difference. And then when I look at the decision I made to go to Duke and put my trust in these coaches, I kind of in the back of my mind think about Coach Landers at UGA, who had known me since I was in 7th grade, who knew my brother, who was close to my high school coach, who was close to my mom, or Coach Davis, who was at Clemson. Like, I look at those coaches, and sometimes I do wonder if I should have gone there. But if things wouldn't have happened the way that they did, I wouldn't even think about it. My time at Duke was precious and I loved it, and I'll always love it. But in the back of my mind, if I had been at UGA or Clemson and that would have happened, it would have been a different situation.
Do situations like that start to affect your view of self? The coaches are putting your value in what you can do for the team. So does that start to mess with you mentally so that maybe you're thinking, okay, my value is here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I know it happens in sports, but it did, because it's like, let's say you have a turnover. I got to the point where I would just automatically look at the bench and be like, I know I'm coming out. Like, it happens, versus one of our star players would have a turnover and they wouldn't come out. And I get that. Like, it's part of the game. But I guess when I was in such a fragile state like that, I didn't feel like my coaches were building me up. It's such a mental game that they play with, practically children. Mm-hmm. But again, I realize that it's all part of it. But no, I think that played with my confidence. So it's like, on top of losing my brother, on top of my ankle surgery, I'm also not feeling like I am valued, but you're telling me that I am and that you need me here, but you're not showing me that I'm valued enough for you to say, you know what, Wynter, you should take a year off. Because I honestly think they were thinking that my sophomore year was going to be like my freshman year. And my mom, who knows me best, said, it's not going to be. Let her stay home. And I think it's like, you see that Final Four opportunity and you taste it and you want more of it. And these coaches are relying on practically children for their job security.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you're probably not alone in feeling the way that you feel. I think there are probably lots of athletes who experience that. It can be cutthroat.
Yeah. And it even trickles down to, like, there was a girl on our team, and I won't name names. She was a great player. And maybe like the offense that we ran wasn't conducive to her, like her individual type of play, but she was an awesome post player. And I remember after one game, she was really upset because I just remember her being upset. I don't remember if it was because she didn't play or she played and she had like one mistake, but I do remember it wasn't like a game that if she'd made a turnover or a mistake, we were already winning. Like, it wasn't going to do anything. And after the game, she was crying. And I'm looking around the locker room. No one's consoling her. Our leaders, captains, aren't going over to her, aren't saying anything to her, aren't even acknowledging that she's upset. It was kind of like in that moment too, I'm like, wait, you had a great game, which is phenomenal. Great. We won. We're so excited that we're a team. But at the same time, one of our teammates is upset and no one is asking her, what's wrong? How can we help? How are you feeling? I mean, I went over to her and tried to console her, and because I'm human, but it's like sometimes that effect trickles down to the players, where your players that are awesome aren't saying anything to the players that they might deem as less value because they don't play.
Mm. Now, after your college career, you went to play overseas. Mm-hmm. Was that experience different?
So my first team I played for was in Switzerland, and my agent at the time found this team for me to build my confidence after college. So the team I played for, in a way, I almost felt like I was in high school again, where I had to do everything. And it was fine. because it did build my confidence. It gave me experience as a first year, like going into European play. My coach was awesome. He spoke 5 different languages. He knew the basics of English. But if I had an injury or something, he would tell me to like sit out, take my time. But like the presidents or the people who own the club would be putting pressure on him to have me play. I was the only American on that team. After a game, I think I had like 40 something points, like 15 rebounds. I think we lost. And the president and my coach and my friend who translated was there. And they're like, we need more from you. I'm like, wow. I'm trying. I'm like, I just had 42 points and like 16 rebounds. I'm like, and then me being respectful, I'm like, okay, like I'll do better. Yeah. I played in Turkey. That was challenging because of our coach, but I was lucky in Turkey. I played with one of my former teammates from college, played at Duke, and I played with 3 other Americans. And so our coach was legit crazy. But you kind of grew to like love it. And it was expected. And I remember him being like, you know, strategy. He would play head games with us. He'd be like, you Americans, you have no strategy. And we'd be like, what the? We're like, oh, I'm going to show you some strategy. And he like always lit a fire in us. Again, the presidents were the ones that would come to us and be like, you know, Americans, we hired you for a reason. Like, we need more from you. And then in Czech, it was kind of the same thing. But I think it was expected because I'm getting physically paid for it. And I don't have any other obligations. You know, You're a professional player versus in college. I don't think coaches take into account the stresses of making good grades, the stresses of you are a person. You do need a social life outside of basketball. So playing pro, I think I looked at it differently. Like, technically, you do not own me, but I work for you. My dad played for the Houston Oilers and Cincinnati Bengals. And hearing stories of my mom talk about my dad's experiences of, she's like, when they're done with you, they're done with you. Like, there's no, let me walk you to the door. Like, it's cutthroat. You're done. You're done. And so going into that, I kind of knew what to expect. Like, if a team doesn't want you anymore, you just don't play for them. You don't get paid. Cool. That's fine. But I think going into college, you're so young and you're just putting so much trust into the coaches and the program versus playing in the pros. Yes, you're putting trust in the coaches, but you also know it's a business.
Somebody's getting paid.
Yeah.
in like college.
Now they are. I'm like, dang, I missed out. But like in Europe, when I played in Turkey, we got bonuses for winning home games. Like, we'd get a certain amount for winning home games, certain amount for winning away games. So it's like there's a little bit more incentive, sadly, but
that makes sense. Are you still involved with sports now that you're not playing professionally?
No. I want to be, but I'm not. If my kids were a little bit older, I would do it. So I see myself in the future doing it. Even when I was substitute teaching at Holy Innocents and I worked there for a year, they try to encourage me to like coach, like not head coach, because I would never, that's too much responsibility, to help out. And I helped out, but I still don't think my heart is in it. I helped out with a boys basketball team at St. Benedict's and I enjoyed it. But I don't think it's something I see myself doing consistently, only because I know it requires so much time and I want to give those kids the same time and effort that someone put into me. And I know I can't give 100% right now. So for me, I'm like, if I can't give 100%, I'd rather not do it.
Well, Wynter, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak to me. There's some young athlete that needed to hear what you had to say. There's some coach even that needed to hear what you had to say. So I appreciate you being so open and honest about your story.
You're welcome. It was nice talking with you, Shannon. Thank you for this opportunity.
I hope Wynter's story made you write your own narratives, and I hope you'll join me again to write some more. If you like what you heard today, click the plus in Apple Podcasts to subscribe. If you're planning on leaving a 5-star review, let me know what narratives you're writing, and I'll read them on the show. Thanks again for listening. This is Shannon. Grace and blessings until next time.